So I'd be excited to see if he actually found a way to do some of that with whatever they put out with this, merger if it happens. Because I'm a big fan of his and James Wan, but yeah,
Will you be excited to find out, Steve, or will you be terrified to find out?
Well, I guess it depends how it ends up, but
All right.
nice transition there, John. Yeah, so Ronald, required viewing. Speaking of
Yes.
horror movies,
So
not
Ronald,
one that James
tonight we're
Wan or
changing it.
Jason Blum is
Yeah.
involved in.
Tonight we're changing the name of this feature from required viewing to explain yourself.
Yeah. So I mean,
I'm just
I
kidding.
picked I picked 2016's The Terrifier, Damien Leone. I'm gonna say Leone. Damien Leone's terror movie. Yeah, I only say that because like it is. I picked this because these movies really split the room, man. And
Yeah.
I'd never seen them, and I see Art the Clown everywhere. I see Art the Clown art. I see Art the Clown clips, compilations, and with the release of Terrifier 2, I kind of wanted to get it under our
Yeah.
belts just to see it. I didn't have any expectations beyond that there'd be a clown in it.
So that was your awareness. You had not seen much because I'd read about Terrifier a few years ago,
Yeah.
and then like sought out a few clips online because I heard there were some really weird, brutal moments in it.
Yes.
And I checked them out, and it seemed like not my tempo when I watched those clips. And then when Terrifier 2 came out and was having all this hype, I did a similar thing. I kind of hunted down like, well, what's up with why are people talking about the kills in this?
Yeah.
And then I sort of found myself going, not my tempo again.
Yeah.
And then when you suggested watching it, it was like, you know what? I'm going to give this movie a good shot and just watch it like any old movie rather than going ahead and deciding it's in that kind of what you said, Ronald. You say this movie divides the room, or these movies do. But I also think it's just in a subgenre of horror that you might be a horror fan and not watch this type of like exploitative sort of throwback kind of pure horror, kind of pure. I mean, there's a part of me that admires the purity of a movie like this, even as it's kind of turning me off with like every creative choice, just about.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to talk about even within that, because what you, Ronald, said that I think is really crucial is the Terrifier 2 is having a moment. I mean, it's
having a serious
it got to the point where it's like, oh, people are talking about this and everybody's talking about it like it's something different and like it's something that blew their minds. People are throwing up, people are fainting, there was all those kind of stories. So I don't know.
I did see All Hallows Eve, which was not the first appearance, but the first like grand entrance of Art the Clown. So I did see that. It's an anthology of stories. And Art is kind of intertwined into all the stories in the anthology, which is very hard to explain when you watch it, but it is what I saw. Yeah. And I did see Art the Clown prior to this movie, but I hadn't seen a full movie devoted to this character. So I guess I want to know what you guys think, and maybe I'll tell you guys at the end what I thought.
I don't know. I'm not really a fan of it. I mean, I feel like this. Yeah, I'm probably the person that John just described. Like, I love horror movies and I love horror in general.
Yeah.
But I guess like just the exploitative, I also just don't think that it's like a good movie. Like I don't think that there's anything creatively beyond maybe Art the Clown. Just physically and just iconically, like I can see why there's something there with that, because that is a pretty creepy, scary, figure in horror. I can see why people latch on to that. And I do think visually it's like a really cool monster, quote unquote. But I just, it's the kind of thing that I kind of have trouble getting through. Like, I don't know, some of and I can appreciate and respect like a low budget movie that is working with what it has. And that's really not even where I'm going with any of my concern or criticism of it.
Yeah.
It's more so of just like the story and the choices and the characters. Like, there really isn't anything about the movie that makes me interested in watching it at all, with the exception of acknowledging Art is like, yeah, it's pretty creepy and scary.
Well, Steve, I want to like just throw in there, because I think you're kind of making my main point here, which is that other than art, this movie has nothing going on. Like, it's so rare to see a movie that like maybe there's a line or two that indicates like a relationship between the sisters, I think.
Some friends, yeah.
But like it's so sketched in. Even when like the radio report comes on and they're talking about the murders that have just happened, they say the local sheriff says, it's like they didn't even say like, you know what I'm saying? They didn't even, like, on the radio, they usually would say the name of the sheriff or the name of the county or something. But instead, it's like the local sheriff said in town there was a killer, a man died. You know, it's like they have thought so little through that I wasn't so much pissed off by that. But I do think that's a detriment to this movie, that like if you're not engaged by the tone and if you're not here for this kind of violence and this kind of gore, just as a rule, not to say that I'm not here for it, but I'm not going to sign up just for that. Then it's like there's literally no, like, some horror movies will bother me with how much they attempt to make you care about what's happening outside of the main storyline. This movie was the opposite. There was literally nothing except for a kind of drawn out, you know, slow moving, single location, more or less, movie. So I think that's part of why it's hard to get through, Steve. I was prepared to be disgusted, but I was more bored than disgusted. But I did get a little disgusted at points. It's pretty misogynistic, right? I mean, like, the major kill that they linger on in this movie, what made me really uncomfortable, the way that it's filmed, and I mean, and I agree that horror, I think that's what I wanted to ask you guys about, is like, why do we have a line between the kind of horribly violent, blasphemous stuff that tickles our fancy and we think is really good, and the stuff that just feels kind of cheap and like sleazy or something? Like, what's that line, and why is that line there?
I have something to say. I think Steve isn't artsy fartsy about everything. But one thing he's artsy fartsy about is his horror films.
Yeah,
I think there's editing. There's a art to good horror films that this lacks. It's almost like man. You know, there's something that really bothers me. There's like this audience that's like, fuck the establishment. This is what people like for horror and stuff like that. So I kind of went on like just seeing how people felt about it. And what I'm starting to understand is like, I don't mind there being a level of like, I'm going to throw up watching this movie. But what I really want at the heart of it is good storytelling. Yeah. And I think that's what y'all were saying. And with Steve, you know, you were kind of hitting on when you first started talking about it. And what you were saying, John, like there is whatever, let's name any horror film that we've ever talked about. If that person did a comedy and it had the structure of that horror film, we would like that movie. If it was a romantic comedy and there's something about structure and beginning, middle, and end. What are the motivations of the character? And there's like there's a development of story that we want to see that these things lack. And it's almost like if somebody cannot differentiate this, because I talked to somebody about this, Terrifier 2 from Barbarian, if you cannot differentiate what makes Barbarian special as a storytelling versus this one, I will slap the piss out of you. It doesn't make any sense. It just bothers me. I mean,
you're mentioning Terrifier 2. What we just watched was Terrifier, and the reason I want to mention that is that Terrifier 2 is an hour longer.
It's a 2. Yeah, it's like
a 2 hour and 20-minute movie. Yes, and I watched enough of it to know that it's it's not because I have not finished it, but it's not because so much happens in it. If you were thinking, this must be
right,
because the idea of like a horror epic, I like that. I mean, that made me go, someone could do a slasher epic. You know, you could do it. It would be interesting to see someone really bite off that kind of huge storyline and try to take a B grade idea like this and make it like with great characters and great scenarios, but that's not what it is. It's really just this, but even more padded. And more gruesome, drawn out kills. And I think that's what Terrifier 2 is getting a lot of fame for, is the fact that the kills are off the chain insane. And once again, there's a couple of women who, guess what, have some pretty nasty stuff happen to them. And I just am surprised I haven't heard anybody say that, like, about these movies. I guess horror has a certain amount of exploitation and misogyny kind of baked into it. And we talk about it, but the best movies thwart it or use that, like, even back when it was maybe still a little sexist to say, oh, we're surprising you that this woman has the fortitude to survive this situation, even if that is inherently sort of a sexist model. You still had examples that are great within that, like Sigourney Weaver in Alien, or Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween, where it's like, oh no, this is not about watching a woman suffer. This is about watching a character be a badass, and they happen to be a woman, and I don't know. I just feel like that's always been a discussion to have about horror, but I found this movie to be just kind of mean in that way. And like, again, whenever you watch these movies and always notice who gets the worst kill, who gets the most drawn out scene, who gets the most suffering on screen, who's the most humiliated, whatever. Oftentimes it'll be a woman in this type of movie. But also just bringing nudity and sexuality into a scene like that is always something that makes me uncomfortable, because like, I don't know if you guys do this. I just sometimes think about, like, if it's a situation where I'm thinking how uncomfortable it must have been for the actor to go through this, then it feels weird for me to watch it for kicks. But I know I sound like such a prude, because there's a lot of movies that are incredibly uncomfortable and do all these things, but do it artfully. And I don't have this feeling of like, why am I watching this? Or who loves it? Like, I could see who maybe watches this with their friends and enjoys the fun of it, of kind of talking over it. But who loves this movie? Outside of, as you've said, I will say, the design of Art the Clown, the way that his eyes and mouth become these like black maws when he's in the shadows, his weird teeth, the fact that he's silent and he mimes and he mocks people and he does little mincing movements that kind of make fun of people and stuff. That stuff is all pretty effective and pretty creepy. I really wish there was any story to him at all, and that there was more going on with the characters, because then I think the low budge aspect of it would have appealed to me, or I would have admired the of it. But instead I was kind of like I said, I was turned off at so many moments where normally a movie like this, if it was chugging along, I'd be getting more invested because of the hat trick of being cheap and being scary and gory and all that. Like, I don't know. I like to feel like the actors seem like they're having fun. And maybe they did in this. Maybe they all had a blast, but it looked to me like I don't know, a miserable experience.
One thing I did really enjoy was like when you realize that the scope of what art will use to kill somebody is not what you think it is. I love that. I love that you're like, it's this. Oh, but it could also be. I don't want to give it away.
Well, no, I will say that there's a thing he uses that often I think kind of breaks the slasher rule if a slasher uses this weapon. But it was almost, if I had been there and this movie had me there in that darkly funny place where I was laughing despite myself, I would have found that moment funny maybe. But instead it was just like, man, this is so ugly. And I just felt so bad for the character and the actress and myself. But no, I do agree that is like and also just the mechanics of him. Like I said, there's no story to him. Maybe in the other movies you get a little bit of a story to why he's the way he is. He just kind of shows up. I would say that should make him creepier, but I think instead it made it feel to me like there's like, once again, there's so little going on under the hood of this movie. They nailed the image and the idea behind a mime killer. Also the way that he kind of goes out and just mills about and interacts with people outside of the kill scenes, that there's something to do with that's funny. Like, I want to see him at like a department store, at the mall, or at the food court, or at the post office. But they didn't really do that. So I guess I give them high marks for Art the Clown, and low marks for just about everything else.
I kind of like
and maybe the gore. The effects were decent.
I'll say like the effects were pretty good. Like the practical stuff looked pretty good.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think I liked it had really nothing from the beginning. It's bookends, but like I think I kind of like the device they use in terms of, I guess, the reveal of who the character is at the beginning,
versus the wraparound
and who that character is. Like, I think that was kind of cool.
Yeah,
but I think getting from A to Z, like if there was any kind of quality or something in between the two, I would have cared about that reveal. Beyond just being like, oh, that was kind of cool, an interesting way to tell the story. But I wish I was interested in it all, and in it, or the people in it. But yeah, this one wasn't for me. Sorry.
Yeah, I get you.
Well, there's.
I know you didn't make it, Ronald. I'm just saying, like, it's just this is not one of the ones that works.
And you had not seen. No, I think this required viewing is not. I mean, it's any movie. So if it's something none of us have seen, that's fine too, because you can do what you've done, Ronald, which is force a topic. I was looking forward to us eventually watching these and talking about them just because they are being talked about. So I'm glad to kind of rip the Band-Aid off of this and just let it happen. But I will say this, I just have a couple of like nitpicks. One thing is, it was a bad omen for me when this movie started off and the written and directed by Damien Leone credit was up, and the written and directed by isn't really centered right with the name.
It is kind of
things that should be centered but aren't. I as a former graphic designer, that gives me a massive headache. But the fact that it's the written and directed by credit, you would think of all the ones, you would at least make sure, at least you would think Ego would lead you to check that one.
Right.
The one thing also I noticed that I just thought this was funny. There's a part where a person is attacking a wooden door with a metal pipe. There's a chain around two handles, and there's a master lock on the chain. In the order of what would be likely to be broken by the pipe, you would say maybe the wooden doors first, maybe the handles are next, maybe the chain is next. The least likely thing to break with the pipe is that you would just open the lock with the pipe. But that's what happens, is that the master lock is popped open by being hit with a pipe. I thought that was silly. And the other thing I thought, this is more of a question this is more of a comment than a question. Those were more comments than questions. This is more of a question than a comment, I guess. There was one scene after he kills the bug guy, and spoilers, folks, the bug guy dies. He looks off because he hears the bike bell. And then he like walks away. And the next time we see him, I think he's riding the little bike around and ringing the bell. What the fuck? How did the bike bell ring when Art wasn't on it or ringing it? I mean, I honestly am saying, is there some kind of entity hinted at that I didn't know about that I just didn't get? Is that like an alarm system that he has that just sounds like a bike bell and he hears it wherever he is in the building? Is he in that building? Is that where he stays? The woman who has a doll that she thinks is a baby, she kind of seems to know him, but then also doesn't really seem to know him. I was wondering what you guys made of that, and did the bike bell, how did you interpret him hearing the bike bell and then walking away, and the next time we see him, he's on the bike? So was someone on his bike? Is there a character we don't know about?
I didn't think that far into it.
Okay.
I'll be honest. I thought, if anything, I would say it's like just he's crazy. Maybe he's just hearing, it's time to go.
It's time to go.
Is he doesn't get a dinner bell? He gets a bike bell.
Is that lady home? Was that lady homeless?
I thought
she said it like he was a tenant. Like she was a tenant. She was talking to the other woman like she was.
When we first meet her and she talks about the situation, it sounds, I thought they were doing their attempt at sort of a Texas Chainsaw Family kind of thing, where it's like, oh, he hangs around this old warehouse and there's a homeless lady that he kind of interacts with, and she's nuts. And I thought, but then when it turns out, it's like, oh, she seemed to be finding out he was a murderer in this movie. And then her fate is horrible too. But you do see her naked, folks. Don't worry. So I thought I found that was that was confusing to me, like what her role was. And also like the janitor guy who was working in the adjacent building, it kind of seems like he would have been around this scenario enough to see what was going on too. And I couldn't tell how much he knew. At first I thought there was going to be a lot of like a little team of people that were working under Art, or maybe like his servants or something, but that didn't happen. So anyway, Art the Clown.
Art the Clown.
More like Fart the Clown, am I right, guys? Then he comes in and kills me. That's the kind of shit he would kill you for.
Yes, absolutely. And then he'd like cut your leg off and beat you with it. But not like a regular level, till you were mush.
Yeah.
That's just the whole motivation of this guy, is to do overkill for every kill.
And maybe he would eat my face.
Yeah.
Yikes. Yeah.
There was no consistency to it.
No.
Is he a cannibal? What kind of killer is he?
Is he human? Honestly,
he's all of them.
He's not. No. He doesn't seem to be human.
He's
either.
all the killers.
Yeah, he's all the killers combined.
Well, we'll come back and address the Art the Clown phenomenon, because I really think that whatever they have planned next, that's going to be the thing to be curious about, right? Because after Terrifier 2 made such waves, I feel like, somebody's going to bankroll some 3, or they're going to get at least more than they've had, and maybe they'll finally explain maybe a prequel where we see what happened to his teeth.
Yeah,
it's just him eating cotton candy all day and then going to bed without brushing his teeth or something like that. Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
So Steve, you said you hadn't. Oh wait, it's time to name the next required viewing for next week.